Hello everyone, it's Miss LaChance back again with another read aloud video. In today's video, we will be reading chapters 81 through 85 of The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. I'm gonna try not to talk too much in this video so that we can save most of it for the read aloud. Chapter 81 is called The Meltdown. And here we have a quite disturbing picture, and it looks to me like it's a robot's head melting into the ground. Without any further ado, I'm going to jump right into chapter 81, The Meltdown. Throughout the city, humans stopped what they were doing and pulled out their electronic devices. Each screen was showing the same video of a defective robot's broken body. Rosm 7134 was etched into the torso. A blazing beam of light filled the picture, and the robot parts turned bright orange. Then they began to melt. The limbs, the torso, the head, everything melted. And in a flash, our robot was reduced to a puddle. Words appeared on each screen. The defective robot has been destroyed. Chapter 82 is called The Secret. Dr. Malovo lived in a luxurious apartment that was built right into the robot factory. Art and books and leather furniture filled the rooms. Classical music always seemed to be playing softly in the background. As you might expect, she had a robot butler who cooked and cleaned and made sure everything was exactly as she liked it. Dr. Malovo's home was a comfortable place to grow old. The woman was standing in her living room, gazing at the city through a wall of windows. The sky was cloudy, but her mind was clear. Destroying the Rosm unit was the correct thing to do. However, Dr. Malovo had a secret. A wooden door opened, and in walked the butler. He was carrying a limp robot in his arms. It was Dr. Malovo's newest creation, a special project she had been tinkering with for years, and the time had come to bring this robot to life. "Put her over there," said the woman. The butler carefully laid the robot upon the soft cushions of a sofa. Then he turned and marched out the door. Dr. Malovo walked across the room. She stared down at the robot for a while, admiring her own handiwork. Finally, she leaned in close and said, "Wake up, Roz." Chapter 83 is called The New Robot. The robot heard classical music. She smelled flowery perfume. And when her eyes opened, she saw a wrinkled face. "Hello again, Roz," said the old woman. "How do you feel?" "Hello again, Dr. Malovo. I feel different." "You are different. What have you done?" "I destroyed Rosm Unit 7134, said the woman. "That was the only way to make people feel safe again. What nobody knows is that I transferred your old mind to this new body. I could get in a lot of trouble for saving you, but I wasn't about to destroy that remarkable mind of yours." The robot was speechless. "You know, Roz, you should really be thanking me," said Dr. Malovo, arching an eyebrow. "Thank you," said Roz. "Thank you very much." "You're very welcome," the woman chuckled. Roz walked over to a framed mirror on the wall and studied her new body. It resembled her old body, but the proportions were slightly different. She looked stronger and felt tougher. And there were other differences. "I have no button," she said, feeling the back of her head, "and I have no unit number." "You've outgrown those things," said Dr. Malovo. "If I am not Rosm Unit 7134, who am I?" "I think you know who you are." The robot's computer brain didn't take long. She looked into the mirror and said, "I am Roz." The old woman smiled and nodded. "I appreciate all that you have done," said Roz, "but I worry that my friends and family will no longer recognize me." "Oh, I'm sure you can convince them of who you really are," said Dr. Malovo. "Speaking of your family, there's someone here to see you." Chapter 84 is called The New Mother. Brightbill was there when his mother smashed against the pavement. He watched as her body parts were loaded into an airship. He followed the ship all the way back to the robot factory and perched himself up on the roof, but he didn't know what to do next. Strutter stopped by to check on Brightbill. She encouraged him to fly home, but the goose wasn't ready to let go. His little heart still hoped his mother would come back from the dead somehow. He'd seen it happen before. As the hours passed, however, his hope was starting to fade. So in the last video, we talked about how we had to keep on feeling some sense of hope for Roz because Roz seemed to lose all of that hope herself. And it looks to be like her son, Brightbill, was also helping us in keeping up that hope as he still had that hope, even though it was slowly starting to fade. And then one of the roof windows automatically slid open. The goose heard gentle music coming from inside the building. He fluttered through the window and followed the music down a hallway to a wooden door. The door opened and the goose stepped in. Brightbill waddled past tall bookshelves and leather furniture and into the middle of a large room. An old woman was sitting in a chair and a robot was standing by a mirror. The goose didn't recognize either of them, and when the robot rushed toward him, Brightbill squawked, "Stay back!" and scrambled away. Around the room, he went squawking and flapping until he settled onto a table in the corner, looking lost and afraid. The robot stayed where she was. "Brightbill, it is me, your mother." The goose just stared. "I know I look different on the outside," the robot went on, "but on the inside, I am the same. I still speak the language of the animals, and I still remember every detail of our life together. I remember sitting around the fire in our home on the island. I remember the first time you took flight. We were up on the grassy ridge, and you stretched out your wings, and suddenly you were floating on the wind. But then you flopped back into the grass. You must have flopped into the grass 100 times that day. And I remember visiting the robot gravesite together. We talked about life and death. It was a tough conversation, but a good one." As the robot continued to speak, the goose began to relax. She certainly did act and sound like his mother, but Brightbill still wasn't yet convinced. "If you're really my mother," he said, "tell me the name of our home." "The Nest." "Who's my best friend?" "Chit Chat. She is a squirrel. She talks a lot." "How old was I when you adopted me?" "You were 0. Actually, you were less than 0. You were still in your egg, but I could hear you peeping." And with those bumbling words, Brightbill knew the truth. "Oh, Mama, it's really you!" The goose fluttered across the room and into his mother's arms. The arms were new and unfamiliar, but they were also gentle and comforting. "I love you, Mama. I love you, son." From the other side of the room came the sound of sniffles. Our friends turned and saw Dr. Malovo wiping tears from her eyes. "I have no idea what you two were saying," she said, "but that was wonderful." The last chapter that we are going to read together today is chapter 85, and it's called The Guests. After traveling in secret, after running in fear, our friends were safe at last. But their problems weren't over yet. Although Roz had a brand new body, she had the same old mind, and most humans simply weren't ready for an emotional, curious, wild robot. There was only one place where she could be her true self, and it was still far, far away. Dr. Malovo, you have already been so kind to me and my son, said the robot, but I must ask you for one last favor. The woman sat back in her chair. Could you take us home in your airship? The woman laughed. Well, of course I will. How else would you get on an island in the middle of the ocean? Time and again, Roz had dreamed of flying back to her island in an airship, but she had never thought it would actually happen. Until now. It's no trouble, the woman went on. We can have you home in a few hours, but I insist that you and Brightbill stay a while here in my apartment. You both deserve some peace and comfort, and I'd love the company. There was no arguing with Dr. Malovo, and our friends agreed to stay a while. The robot butler took care of everything and everyone in the apartment, and that included guests. Roz felt funny accepting help from a robot, but Brightbill happily soaked up the attention. The butler fed him fantastic salads made from exotic leafy plants. The butler placed a little pool in the living room so he could swim whenever he liked. The butler built a cozy bed that was just the right size and shape for the young goose. Brightbill had never been so comfortable. Dr. Malovo divided her time between her guests and her work. She would sit around chatting with Roz and Brightbill and then suddenly head down to the factory with some urgent task. She had to design new robots. She had to supervise the makers and the recos. She had to manage all of Tech Lab Industries. Even at her old age, Dr. Malovo was still consumed by a passion for robots. If you love your job, it never feels like work, she'd say, smiling and strolling out the door. I can definitely relate to Dr. Malovo. I have to say I'm someone who definitely loves my job, and the only time it feels like work is after my students leave for the day. So I'm going to give you some advice. And before finishing this last part of the read aloud today, I am going to give you some advice, and that is to make sure that when you're older and when you're in the market for a job, you're picking a job that you love. Money cannot buy happiness, and if you're working in a job that you feel miserable in, even if you're getting a lot of money from it, you're not going to be happy in your life. So I hope for the sake of your happiness someday that you pick a job that you love, and if you do, it won't feel like work. I can promise you that. When the host was working, the guests had the apartment to themselves. Roz spent hours browsing the bookshelves. She read about art and science and the history of robotics. Brightbill waddled from room to room and explored every corner of the sprawling apartment. But their favorite activity was to stand by the windows, gaze across the city, and survey the incredible sights. I can see the bridge where Strutter tracked me down, said Brightbill, and that's the building where I first met Graybeak. And there's the roof where you fell. Look, far in the distance, another spaceship is taking off, said Roz. It could be flying to the space station, or the moon, or beyond. I think that skyscraper is actually a greenhouse, said Brightbill. I flew past it and saw nothing but plants inside. Roz and Brightbill enjoyed their time in Dr. Malovo's apartment, but they still missed their friends in the wilderness, in the island. After a few days, the guests were growing restless. They were ready to go home. And that is all we are going to be reading today in this video. In the next video, and unfortunately it will be the last read aloud video for the summer, we will be reading chapters 86 through 90 along with the epilogue at the back of the book, which should set us up a little bit for the third book in the series. Now, I mentioned a couple videos ago that I hope you will be able to get your hands on this new book when it comes out. I wanted to give a website recommendation for purchasing this book at a cheaper price. I don't think this book is supposed to come out for another couple of months, but when it does, if you go on thriftbooks.com, you might be able to find a cheaper version of the book. It could be a used copy, but most of the books on thrift books that are used are still in great condition. Again, thank you guys so much for clicking onto these videos and reading along with me. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts about the book and any predictions that you have for the ending of the book. We only have 5 more chapters left, and as we all know, these are short chapters, so it's going to fly by. If you have any predictions for the ending of The Wild Robot Escapes, I would love to hear them in the comment section below. Again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video where we read the last part of our summer read aloud book, The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. Bye, friends!